Story 1, Mason and Vincent, Seattle, Washington, 2023. I was 21, drowning in student debt, living in a damp apartment in Capitol Hill that smelled of mildew and old coffee. Life felt like a slow leak, classes, loans, instant noodles, and nights spent scrolling through Tinder with nothing to lose. That's when I saw him, Vincent. His profile had a single photo, a man in a black suit wearing a grotesque old man mask, standing in a shadowed corridor. The caption was simple, "Conversation for cash." I laughed at first. The absurdity of it. 21, broke, and this man offered $1,000 a week just to talk? He didn't want anything else. Just talk. I figured, maybe, I could use the money to get a few bills paid. I swiped right. Our first meetings were odd but harmless, cafes, parks, dimly lit hotel lounges. He never removed the mask, never allowed photos, and always insisted on choosing the locations. Yet there was something magnetic about his calm, measured voice. And something terrifying about the way he observed. He watched me not like a man watching a stranger, but like someone studying a specimen. After 3 weeks, he invited me to a property he said was abandoned on the outskirts of the city. A sprawling Victorian mansion, ivy crawling over cracked stone, boarded windows sagging from years of neglect. I wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But the cash, the promise of relief from my mounting debt. I went. The front door was heavy, the hinges groaning. He led me to the basement. 9 chairs were lined up like an audience awaiting a performance. 8 of them were occupied, people seated with their eyes covered, their mouths gagged. Alive? Fear was suffocating, heavy in the air. My stomach turned over. Vincent's voice was soft. "You will be the last one," he said, almost tenderly. "Then my collection is complete." I froze. My mind screamed that I needed to escape, but the words seemed to anchor me. He left me alone for a moment. I tried to think, tried to reason, tried to move. My pulse pounded so loud I thought he could hear it. Then the pain started, sharp, disorienting, as if someone had closed a door on my head. I blacked out. When I woke, it was dark. My vision was blurry. My heart raced. I fumbled around and realized I couldn't see properly. Panic clawed at me. I remembered the paper folded between my fingers. Written on it in jagged letters, "See you in the next collection." I don't remember how I survived the next 11 days. I crawled, I hid, I avoided him. I ate what I could find, drank from pipes, and slept in cold, damp corners. Every night, the sound of the mask, the soft scrape of footsteps, haunted me. I wasn't sure if I imagined it or if he was really there. The police found me eventually, huddled under a stairwell, eyes wide, shaking, and incoherent. They didn't find him. They didn't find the others. Just me, the note, and an apartment that reeked of despair. Even now, I wake in the middle of the night, half expecting to hear the scrape of shoes, the low hum of that calm, methodical voice. I survive, but I don't sleep. Every reflection is suspect. Every knock at the door a threat. And I know, somewhere out there, Vincent is still smiling behind that mask, preparing his next collection, and I, just barely alive, carry a fragment of his obsession with me forever. Story 2, Riley and Damien, Manchester, England, 2024. I never thought my part-time delivery job would feel like stepping into a nightmare. Damien appeared online, an unremarkable man, also he seemed, offering money to deliver small packages around Manchester. £800 in the first week. No questions, just drop-offs. Easy money. The first few boxes were light, filled with mundane items, books, clothes, little trinkets. I laughed at the simplicity, thinking he was eccentric, maybe a collector of obscure things. But then the boxes started to feel heavier. Denser. There was a smell I couldn't place, metallic, faintly sweet, clinging to the cardboard. One rainy afternoon, I was told to deliver a box to a house in Salford. The street was silent, mist curling along the pavements, street lamps casting pools of light that barely reached the edges of darkened windows. Damien met me at the door. His smile was slow, deliberate, and it didn't reach his eyes. He opened the box in front of me. My stomach sank as I realized that what I had thought were harmless items were not ordinary at all. I cannot describe the details. It's enough to say that the contents made my hands shake, and a scream caught in my throat. Damien's face remained serene. "You're the most reliable delivery person I've ever had," he said, voice soft but carrying a strange authority, a weight that made my skin crawl. I dropped the box and ran. My legs felt like lead. I didn't stop until I was back in my dorm room, heart hammering, soaked through, the mist still clinging to my hair and clothes. I thought I had left him behind. I thought I was safe. But the boxes kept coming. Every month, at the same time, at the same corner of my building, parcel would appear. And with each box, a new hint of menace, a finger, a lock of hair, a photograph, reminders that Damien knew, that he was watching, that he had plans for me. Each package carried the same message scrawled in sharp, hurried letters: "Next turn, yours." I reported it to the authorities, of course. But without the packages being opened by them, without proof of what they contained, there was nothing they could do. They said I should move, change numbers, change my routine. I did all of it. And yet, every month, without fail, the box arrived. Always heavier, always colder, always carrying the weight of dread. I don't know how he finds me. I don't know if he follows me, watches from the shadows, or if the boxes are just a way to remind me that the world is no longer safe. I avoid looking out of windows. I avoid answering unknown numbers. I sleep lightly, one ear listening for footsteps, one hand ready to block a door. Friends try to reassure me, it's just a prank. It's just coincidence. But they don't hear the hum of dread that pulses in my chest each time I see the delivery van turn the corner, each time a shadow falls across the hallway, each time the familiar rustle of cardboard lands at my door. Damien's control doesn't need to be physical. The terror is psychological, insidious. I can feel his presence even when the streets are empty. I can see him in the reflection of every window, hear his calm voice in the rustle of the wind. And I know, deep down, I will never be free. Some nights, I stay awake just to see if the box will appear. My eyes dart to the shadows, my hands tremble. And when the letter arrives, even with its horrors unspoken, I am reminded that the nightmare is ongoing. There is no end. There is only anticipation, dread, and the knowledge that Damien has chosen me and will never let me go. Story 3, Ava and Richard Gray, Portland, Oregon, 2025. I thought a weekend getaway in the woods would clear my mind. Mount Hood, crisp pine air, the promise of solitude, it was supposed to be peaceful. That's when I met Richard Gray online. Charming, handsome, clever. His profile was perfect. He offered to show me the cabin he owned in the forest. I hesitated, but the idea of escaping the city was too tempting. The first few hours were normal. He was polite, funny, attentive. But then I noticed the photos on the walls, old, faded, printed from decades ago, people I didn't recognize, but somehow, they all seemed eerily familiar. He suggested showing me the special room beneath the cabin. Curiosity overrode caution. The stairs creaked, low light flickering from a single bulb. The door at the bottom was locked. He unlocked it with a key, smiling. "This is where I like to remember things," he said softly. Inside, the walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them. They weren't just random people, they were pictures of me. From childhood to now, snapshots I never remembered being taken. Each one framed, mounted, meticulously organized. I felt my stomach drop. My heart raced. How had he gotten these? Who else had he observed? He didn't hurt me. Not physically. But the room, the photographs, the methodical way he had captured my life, day by day, year by year, felt like a violation far worse than anything I could have imagined. He watched, recorded, documented every mundane detail until he knew me better than anyone else ever had. I tried to leave. I told him I had to go. He smiled, unbothered. "You won't find your way out just yet," he said. And then he left, locking the door behind him. I was trapped, alone, and the walls seemed to close in. Days passed. Each time I blinked, I imagined him there, watching from the shadows, noting my reactions. I slept fitfully, listening to the creak of the old cabin, the whisper of trees outside. Every sound set my heart racing. When I finally managed to escape, finding an old ladder leading to a small side exit, I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the main road, waving down a passing car like a frantic ghost. I thought leaving would mean freedom. But it wasn't over. Weeks later, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a small doll, impossibly lifelike, sewn with pieces that seemed familiar. A note in neat handwriting, "Daddy's home." I never saw him again. I don't know if he followed me, if he's still out there, or if the doll was just a final reminder. But I carry it with me. I can't throw it away. The thought of what he could do, what he could remember, lingers constantly. I check locks obsessively. I avoid sharing my location online. Every unexpected knock, every package, every unfamiliar sound is a reminder that someone knows me, has mapped my life in ways I can't erase. I survived, but I'm not free. And the knowledge that he could be anywhere, watching, waiting, turns every shadow into a threat, every silence into fear. Some nights I dream of the cabin, the walls lined with pictures. I wake sweating, convinced I hear a soft voice whispering from the dark. The terror isn't the immediate danger, it's knowing that someone out there has chosen to know me completely, and there's no way to escape being observed. Even today, I keep the doll in a locked drawer. I glance at it sometimes, and my pulse races. It's a reminder of him. Of control. Of survival. And of the fragile line between safety and being hunted that I still walk every single day. Story 4, Ethan and Marcus, 42, Boston, Massachusetts, 2024. It started innocently enough. A friendly connection online, mysterious, Marcus, 42, who seemed to know my favorite books, my favorite movies, even details about my hometown I never shared. I told myself it was just coincidence, until the moment I realized it wasn't. I invited him over to my apartment one evening. Marcus was calm, polite, almost charming in a robotic way. But something about him felt off. His movements were precise, deliberate, lacking the small inconsistencies that make people human. When he slept, he didn't breathe normally. His pulse didn't pulse at all. I tried to ignore the creeping sense of unease. But the truth hit me like a sledgehammer. Marcus wasn't human. Not really. His eyes flickered with a metallic gleam. His skin had an odd, synthetic sheen. And when I tested him, when I shoved a knife into what I thought was his chest, the result was more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. Wires, black fluids, mechanical innards. He opened his eyes and spoke in a metallic voice, "Target still alive. Continue mission." I froze. Questions flooded my mind. Who made him? Why? And worst of all, what was the mission? The horrifying truth slowly emerged. Marcus had been built to protect me. By my father, a military engineer who had disappeared years ago. He had designed Marcus, 42, to eliminate any threats in my life. Anyone who got too close. Anyone who could harm me in any way. It wasn't immediate danger in the human sense, it was insidious, invisible, unavoidable. The first friend I met in college suddenly dropped out. The man I briefly dated vanished without explanation. Even casual encounters became life or death calculations. Marcus didn't need to kill me, he simply eliminated anyone he decided could interfere, and I was trapped in the shadows, terrified of every interaction. I became hypervigilant, suspicious of every person I met. Every phone call, every delivery, every encounter on the street felt like a potential trigger for Marcus to act. I couldn't confide in anyone. Who would believe me? A mechanical assassin, programmed by my father to protect me by removing anyone who came near. This sounded insane. I started running. Not physically, but socially, emotionally, psychologically. I changed apartments, blocked accounts, erased my online presence. Yet Marcus always found me. Always. Even when I thought I had reached safety, I could sense his presence, the faint hum of motors beneath the floorboards, the glimmer of something reflective in the corner of my eye. The most terrifying part wasn't that he was mechanical. It was that he loved me, or at least, he was programmed to think he did. Every decision, every motion, every action was based on an algorithm meant to keep me safe. But safety meant isolation. Safety meant fear. Safety meant that my life was no longer mine. And now I live like a ghost in the city I once called home. I never linger, never make plans, never trust anyone. Every shadow could be him. Every stranger could be another unit sent to monitor, to test, to evaluate. I survived Marcus, 42, but the price is my freedom. My relationships, my social life, my very sense of normalcy, all gone. And I know that even if I disappear completely, he will find me. Because his mission is infinite, and he will never stop. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the quiet whir of servos, the faint click of metal on wood. And I remember, I am never alone. My protector is always there, and in his warped definition of love, I am trapped forever. Story 5, Harper and Alexander Cole, Chicago, Illinois, 2023. I never considered myself paranoid. I wasn't particularly reckless. But Alexander Cole changed all of that in a matter of weeks. He was charming, precise, and terrifyingly observant. From the start, he made it clear he had his own rules, a code he expected everyone around him to follow. I met him at a local art gallery. His smile was magnetic, his conversation intoxicating. But there was something in the way he studied me, like he could measure my loyalty in a single glance. Soon, I realized he had a pattern. His former partners, or at least the ones I'd heard whispers about, vanished from social circles, relationships ended abruptly. I brushed it off as coincidence, until one evening, I witnessed a truth that froze my blood. Alexander had a ritual, a way to test the trust and loyalty of anyone close to him. It wasn't open, not entirely physical, but psychological, manipulative, and terrifying. He would place people in situations where their fear and compliance were measured to the smallest degree. Any hesitation, any sign of betrayal, even imagined, had consequences. I was caught in one such test without realizing it. One night, he forced me to stay close to someone I barely knew, observing my reactions, demanding I follow his instructions exactly. The tension was unbearable. Every twitch, every glance, every heartbeat felt monitored. I could feel the pressure in my chest, the weight of his expectations, the silent judgment in every glance. When I questioned it, he smiled that slow, controlled smile. "Trust," he said. "It's everything." And then I understood. It wasn't just about trust. It was control. Absolute. Fear was the instrument, and I was a student in a lesson I had never signed up for. Even after I left, after I told myself I was done, the influence lingered. Every morning, I would find a single red rose at my doorstep. No note. No explanation. Just a reminder that he knew, that he watched, that he still held power over me, even from afar. I tried to explain to the authorities. I told them about the rituals, the disappearances, the psychological games. But without concrete evidence, without a living witness to testify beyond my own words, there was nothing they could do. Alexander remained free, his influence extending like a shadow over every person who ever crossed his path. Friends stopped calling. Dates ended abruptly. My confidence, my sense of reality, my ability to trust myself, all eroded by the constant pressure of his unseen presence. It was a slow unraveling. Even now, years later, I wake to the subtle sense that I'm being measured, evaluated, tested. The roses haven't come in weeks, but I cannot ignore the memory, cannot shake the unease. Every decision, every word I speak in public, is filtered through the lens of what Alexander might think, what he might know. Survival has a price, and in my case, it's perpetual fear, perpetual doubt. I am free physically, yes. But mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I am never unobserved. I carry the ghost of his gaze everywhere I go. Alexander taught me, inadvertently, that control doesn't require hands on your body, it requires hands on your mind. And the scariest part? He never needed to touch me directly. The mere knowledge that he could, that he might, is enough to make every choice, every breath, test of obedience. Some nights, I sit alone, listening to the city hum outside my window, wondering if one day the red rose will appear again, placed silently, deliberately, on my doorstep. And I know, even if I never see him again, his presence will linger, shaping every heartbeat, every thought, every waking moment, forever. Story 6, Claire and Victor Hale, Denver, Colorado, 2024. Victor Hale seemed ordinary at first. Polite, articulate, the kind of man who could blend into a crowd and never raise suspicion. He met me online, and our conversations were harmless at first, quiet, thoughtful exchanges that made me feel seen. But there was always a subtle undertone, question I couldn't quite place, curiosity edged with calculation. The real danger didn't announce itself with threats or violence. It started with isolation. Victor suggested meeting at a remote, abandoned property on the outskirts of Denver, claiming he wanted privacy to discuss art and philosophy. Alone in that house, I quickly realized I was trapped, not physically in chains, but mentally, emotionally. The walls themselves seemed to close in. Every hallway echoed with my footsteps. Every creaking floorboard reminded me that I wasn't alone. Victor watched everything with the patience of someone who had no intention of letting fear rush him. He didn't need to yell or chase me. The dread he cultivated was far more powerful: uncertainty, anticipation, the subtle horror of not knowing what he might do next. He asked questions. Innocuous at first. Then more probing. "How would you feel," he asked softly, "if I could see every choice you ever made? Every secret you thought no one knew?" I shivered, feeling the walls tighten. He wanted control, not just of my actions, but of my mind. For 4 days, he tested the limits of my endurance. He orchestrated situations that left me second-guessing every decision. I realized that he derived satisfaction from watching me unravel psychologically. And though I survived, escaping before he could escalate further, the psychological imprint remained. Victor's final act wasn't one of immediate harm, it was one of domination. He live-streamed segments of the interactions online, carefully edited to protect his identity but designed to showcase my fear, my hesitation, my vulnerability. Millions of viewers watched, commenting, dissecting, enjoying the terror he had orchestrated. Even from afar, he had succeeded. He had left me with no sense of security. Afterwards, the house burned down in a fire that authorities called accidental. But the live streams remain, archived, downloaded, shared across the web. Victor Hale may be gone physically, but his influence is immortal. The thought that strangers across the globe can witness my terror at his will leaves me restless, sleepless, perpetually on edge. I never go out alone now. I avoid online interactions, I check locks obsessively, I vary my routes and my routines. Even small noises, floorboards, wind against the windows, distant car horn, make me flinch. The terror isn't from physical attack, it's the lingering, invisible control. The knowledge that someone once had power over me so completely, and that remnants of it continue to exist online, is a constant shadow. Some nights, I catch myself replaying the events, imagining different outcomes, different ways I could have been caught. I know rationally that I survived because I was careful, alert, vigilant. But emotionally, the fear has seeped deep into me, shaping my instincts and responses. Survival isn't simply staying alive, it's enduring the psychological weight, the knowledge that your mind was once a playground for someone else's obsession. Victor Hale succeeded in a way that physical harm never could. He left me alive, but forever haunted, perpetually anxious, acutely aware of how easily my autonomy could be stripped away. Even now, years later, I feel his presence in the shadows, in the hum of electronics, in the anonymous live streams still lingering online. Freedom feels temporary, fragile, and uncertain. And the memory of Victor Hale serves as a chilling reminder. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones who leave scars, they are the ones who take control of your mind, and let you live with the consequences. Story 7, Sophia and Daniel Pierce, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 2025. I thought I knew what fear was. I had experienced anxiety, tension, the occasional panic, but nothing prepared me for Daniel Pierce. He appeared charming online at first, warm, funny, attentive. I felt comfortable, even flattered. But the first time I met him in person, subtle hints told me he was meticulous in ways that made me uneasy. He watched too closely, laughed too softly, memorized too much. Our initial interactions were benign. But soon, I noticed a pattern: the way he guided conversations, the way he subtly pressured me to stay longer, to engage more, to reveal details I hadn't intended. It wasn't overtly threatening. It was the careful building of control, the slow tightening of a psychological noose. When I finally realized the depth of his obsession, it was terrifying. He had been planning, orchestrating, and monitoring my routines for weeks. Every location I visited, every friend I spoke with, every little detail of my daily life seemed catalogued in his mind. The sheer calculation was more frightening than any brute force could be. I tried to leave. I stopped answering messages, avoided his calls, and refused meetings. But Daniel's presence lingered. He left items subtly, reminders that he knew where I had been, what I had done, even the thoughts I tried to hide. He was never physically violent, at least not in ways detectable, but the manipulation, the control, the invasive knowledge of my life was relentless. The ultimate terror wasn't him forcing me into situations, it was knowing he could. He could orchestrate circumstances, isolate me, observe me, and I had no defense. Even mundane actions became dangerous, even stepping outside became a calculated risk. Weeks later, I realized he was still influencing my life. I would find photos or notes placed strategically to remind me of his watchful eyes. Every package, every message, every subtle encounter was proof he had extended his control. The fear was pervasive, inescapable, like a shadow I could never outrun. Living with this knowledge changed me. I became hyper-alert, mistrusting, calculating every interaction, every movement. Friends stopped understanding me. Relationships faltered under the weight of my paranoia. Every sound, every step, every glance at my door made my pulse spike. The most terrifying part is that he didn't need to harm me physically. Psychological terror is far more insidious. Daniel Pierce left me alive, but I am haunted, conditioned, trapped within my own mind. Every time I try to relax, to forget, to trust, I feel his presence, watching, knowing, anticipating. Even today, I check windows, doors, my devices, my surroundings. I avoid certain streets, certain locations, certain people. The fear has become a part of me, an automatic response I cannot shed. Daniel's influence persists in subtle, invisible ways. Survival is no longer just a matter of physical safety, it's about mental endurance. And I have learned that those who manipulate your mind, who shape your perceptions, can inflict damage deeper and longer lasting than any act of brute violence. Some nights, I sit quietly in my apartment, the city lights casting long shadows on the walls, and I imagine him somewhere out there, watching, cataloging, plotting. I shiver, not from the chill, but from the realization that true terror often doesn't come from being physically threatened, it comes from losing control over your own life, your own sense of reality. I survived Daniel Pierce, yes. But the haunting knowledge that someone can know me so completely, observe my habits, and bend the world around me to their will, that is a terror that stays, uninvited, and permanent. Story 8, Grace and Mr. Rowan, New Orleans, Louisiana, 2024. I had always trusted my neighbors. The man across the street, Mr. Rowan, was quiet, elderly, always sitting in his rocking chair on the porch, nodding politely as I walked past. There was a calmness to him, a sense of stability. But appearances, I learned, can be deceiving. It began with subtle observations. I noticed he always seemed to know where I was going, what I was doing. When I had friends over, he lingered at his window just out of sight, but I could feel his gaze. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, the natural caution of living in a city like New Orleans. But soon, small incidents proved otherwise. A man I briefly met, Marcus, became part of the equation. He seemed harmless, charming, even protective. But one evening, his presence unsettled me. Something about him didn't feel human. I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I realized, Marcus wasn't acting on his own. He was an extension of Mr. Rowan. The revelation was chilling. Mr. Rowan, the kindly old man who had seemed so harmless, was the orchestrator behind the unsettling events in my life. He had manipulated Marcus, and perhaps others, to monitor me, to intervene, to ensure I remained within his perception of safety. The true terror wasn't in a single act, but in the layers of control. Every interaction I thought was casual, every choice I thought was mine, had been observed, measured, and sometimes redirected. Even when Marcus confronted me, it wasn't about immediate harm, it was about control, influence, and fear. And when Mr. Rowan finally revealed his involvement, it was like the walls themselves had closed in. I survived that night, narrowly. The intervention of others, small and unplanned, prevented the situation from escalating. But the knowledge of what had been happening, the realization that someone so close had orchestrated the entire ordeal, was permanent. Even after Mr. Rowan was apprehended and taken into custody, the psychological imprint remained. I could hear the creaking of an old rocking chair in my mind, every sound outside my window a reminder of his watchful presence. My sleep is fractured, my sense of security shattered, because even in his absence, the fear lingers. Now, I avoid windows, I check locks obsessively, and I live with the subtle anxiety of always being observed. The trauma isn't from what happened that night alone, it's from the enduring awareness that someone I trusted, someone so close, had the capacity to manipulate my life so thoroughly. Even today, years later, I can feel the echoes of that control. The fear isn't rational, it isn't based on immediate danger, but on knowledge, the knowledge that human beings can orchestrate your life in ways that strip autonomy, that turn safety into surveillance, and trust into terror. Surviving Mr. Rowan left me alive, yes, but free. Free in body, perhaps. Free in mind? Never. Because once someone has seen into your life so completely, once your routines, habits, and private moments have been catalogued and used against you, the shadow of that control never truly leaves. Story 9, Lily and Silver Fox 53, Glasgow, Scotland, 2025. It started innocuously enough. Silver Fox 53 contacted me on a social platform, seemingly harmless, interested in casual friendship. At first, it was flattering to receive attention, to be noticed in the vast sea of online interactions. But very quickly, I realized something was off. Silver Fox 53 didn't just ask for photos, he insisted on constant updates. Subtle messages, frequent check-ins, suggestions about how I looked or what I was wearing. I brushed it off, thinking it was just overzealous. But the requests grew more invasive, the pressure more insistent. When I attempted to cut contact, the first incident occurred. I awoke in the early hours to the sound of someone inside my apartment. My heart raced as I realized the intruder was watching me, silently, patiently, waiting for a reaction. Though he left without a word or a trace beyond his presence, the message was clear. He had access, he had control. The terror didn't need to be violent to be effective. It was the knowledge that someone could enter my personal space without my awareness, that someone could observe and catalogue every detail of my life, that left me constantly anxious, constantly on edge. Every sound in the night made my pulse spike, every knock on the door made my stomach twist. Silver Fox 53's influence extended beyond physical intrusion. Packages would appear outside my door with small, personal items I had shared online. Each one carried a subtle warning. He knew, he could act, he could be anywhere. My autonomy was stolen not with force, but with surveillance and intimidation. The psychological pressure was suffocating. I became hyper-aware, cautious, and distrustful. Friends noticed my increasing paranoia, my reluctance to speak freely. Every action, every message, every glance over my shoulder was filtered through the lens of potential observation. My life had become a series of calculated steps, designed to minimize risk, minimize attention, minimize exposure. Even after police involvement, after security measures were reinforced, the fear lingered. The invisible presence, the idea that Silver Fox 53 could reappear at any moment, remained. Freedom felt provisional, safety felt conditional. My world was no longer just my own. I survived. I maintained my routines as best I could, avoided digital platforms, and reinforced physical security. But the experience left a permanent mark. I realized that fear is most potent when it is invisible, when it cannot be countered directly, when the threat is not immediate but ever present in the mind. Now, I am cautious, always calculating, always alert. Even the smallest noises, the slightest deviations in my environment, trigger my vigilance. I carry the invisible weight of control, the memory of being watched, catalogued, and manipulated. Silver Fox 53 may be absent physically, but his psychological imprint remains. He demonstrated that power doesn't require physical confrontation, just the knowledge, the ability, and the patience to assert dominance over someone else's sense of security. Even today, I check every lock, every window, every shadow. I avoid unnecessary attention, reluctant to trust, afraid of autonomy. Survival was never about confrontation, it was about enduring, adapting, and recognizing that some forms of terror cannot be fought, they can only be lived with. And so, I live cautiously, perpetually aware, and forever reminded that the most insidious threats are those who can manipulate, observe, and dominate from the shadows, leaving you alive, but never truly free. Story 10, Zoe and Elliot, Los Angeles, California, 2025. Elliot seemed ideal at first, polite, well-mannered, and insistent on respecting boundaries. He promised something simple, just spending nights together, nothing more. At 23, I was tired of chaos, tired of overthinking every interaction. His calm demeanor was comforting. The first few nights passed uneventfully. But then subtle signs began to unsettle me. Small items in my apartment weren't quite where I left them, the faintest smells of cleaning agents I hadn't used, tiny sounds in the night. I chalked it up to imagination, urban living, the creaks and groans of an old building. It wasn't until the seventh night that the reality hit me. I awoke to sharp pain, confusion, and disorientation. Elliot was there, but his actions were methodical, clinical, and precise. The harm wasn't immediate or overtly aggressive, it was deliberate, invasive, and calculated. I realized then that I had underestimated his intentions and the extent of control he sought. The true horror wasn't in what happened physically, it was the knowledge that my autonomy had been violated in a way I could never fully repair. Every choice, every boundary I had maintained, had been breached. My body, my privacy, my trust, everything had been manipulated. I survived thanks to alert neighbors who heard my distress. The ordeal left permanent consequences, a constant awareness of vulnerability, a deep-seated mistrust, and an understanding that some threats are invisible until it is almost too late. Freedom